What an opportunity now for Cynthia Apia of Canada, leader after the first heat.
You have to come to accept that you're going to crash, and you're going to crash a lot.
That's so scary.
It is, honestly,
Track record for Cynthia Apia.
I learned to love the sport again, and I found my competitive drive again because I thought it had gone.
First monobob medal, first bobsleigh medal at the top level as a driver.
I kind of let things go by the wayside and let people talk over me instead of putting my foot down to be like, no, this is what I want. This is who I am, and this is what I'm going to fight for.
Well, a glorious end to what has been a tough season for Cynthia Apia.
I will always credit bobsleigh with me finding who I am as a person and finding my voice.
Hey everyone, Jamie here. Welcome to Flame Bearers Unedited, a brand new series bringing to you largely unedited conversations. We heard you loud and clear. You want to hear more stories of more elite women athletes from around the world. So let's jump in.
Yeah, my name is Cynthia Apia, and I am a pilot on the Canadian bobsleigh team.
Cynthia, how did you get into bobsleigh? It's a pretty niche sport, I would say.
Yeah, it's honestly just by luck, and sometimes I'll say serendipity. I was a university student. I went to York University in Toronto, and I was a shot putter and a hammer thrower, and I just kind of had this gut feeling that it wasn't going to go further than just university track. And I think it was like a summer in like either 2010 or 2011 when the Ontario bobsleigh team was doing like a provincial-wide tryouts, and they were going to stop at my university. So I decided I'm already here. I might as well try it out. And showed up, did the testing camp, and that pretty much got the ball rolling to where I'm at now.
That's incredible. So walk us back to that moment. You're a track athlete. What were the different tests that they actually put you through?
It's funny because the tests that they do now, it's the same test they did then, but it was also something on our team that we called the Max Jones test. I don't know if this is something that is across the board. Our coaches said it was from the States, but it's basically our yearly kind of like physical, I guess you could say. But you would do like a 30-meter sprint. You do some jumps, power cleans, bench, squat, and med ball tosses. And then based off of your distances and your times, you get scored on a rubric. And they told us that if you hit a certain number, I think it was if you hit 600 points or more, that would necessitate an invite down to either Lake Placid, which is the closest track to Toronto, which is where I'm from, or you get an invite out to Calgary, which is where the national team was based.
You mentioned that you knew that track was you're probably not going to compete after college. Were you really motivated to become a professional athlete? Where did this desire to try alternative sports to reach a higher level come from?
When I was in university, I mean, anyone who does university sport, I feel like you always have aspirations of carrying it further. And my coach at the time certainly, planted that seed of you can be a professional thrower. And at that time, I didn't see it because I could see where I was throwing and where the rest of the world was throwing. And I was just like, I don't know if I'm like matching the pace of what it takes to be a professional thrower. And the turning point, or like the moment that kind of really solidified it, was the following year. It was 2012 London Games, and I went to the Olympic trials. They were held in Calgary, and I completely bombed out. Like, it was just like one of the worst performances I've ever put. And I just knew then, I was like, yeah, this is fun while it lasts, but I don't see myself dedicating the next, 5, 6, 7 years to be a professional thrower. A lot of throwers peak in their like late 20s, early 30s. And I was just like, there's not a lot of funding in Canada for sport as a whole, but especially as a thrower. So I kind of knew this wasn't for me. But when I tried out for bobsleigh, I don't know what switched in my mind that this was a possibility. I could go to the Olympic Games. I don't know if it was just, the positive reinforcement that I was getting, that like, oh my gosh, you could really make something out of this. Something flipped, and I went from being like, let's be realistic, this isn't going to happen, to, no, why not shoot for the stars and see where I land? Yeah, it was kind of like an interesting like paradigm shift in like thought processes.
That's super cool. Thank you for sharing that all the way through to, I believe you came in recently 4th. Is that correct in Worlds? Is that what an incredible change. So you mentioned the lack of funding specifically in Canada around throwers. What has your journey with funding looked like? I know this is something that a lot of women athletes really come up against and struggle with.
Just think in Canada as a general, the funding isn't necessarily the strongest. Our federation, or the federation I belong to, which is Bobsleigh Canada Skeleton, has done a really good job of trying to balance it out. There have been times where the funding for the women's program hasn't necessarily been on par. And this is just something of a problem of yesteryear that I think we're no longer facing. There is an equal funding structure. It's just not enough for anyone. And that's the thing that we're always dealing with and contending with. Is a lot of the time you're on your own to find personal sponsors, donations from friends and family, GoFundMe to really get yourself to the next level, just because the purchasing power of the dollar now, especially with inflation, with everything that's going on, it's just not as strong as it once was 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. A lot of the time you're kind of soul sourcing a lot of the funding that you need to get yourself to the Olympic Games, to get yourself to World Championships, even to World Cup, which is the highest circuit that I compete on. And it's unfortunate because I do see a lot of people in my sport who could go to that next level or just be so great at it, but they kind of fall through the cracks, or they just come to a point where they're like, I can't afford this anymore and I need to get on with life. So they pack it in and they never really actualize their true potential.
That's devastating. That's absolutely devastating. What has been successful for you in your journey? We have a lot of athletes who are aspiring Olympians, aspiring Paralympians who tune in, who listen. What for you, Cynthia, has worked to make sure that you have been able to actualize your dreams?
I would say a lot of luck. Luck in the sense that I've been surrounded by very awesome people who believe in me and believe in my story, who've been there from the beginning, who've seen all my trials and tribulations and believe in me probably more than I believe in me to get to where I think I'm destined to be. And so just having the right connections, you don't know who might be the door that opens for you to get, whether it's funding or even just support, however it may be, where the value in kind, where it's actual dollars in your pocket. I think I've been very fortunate that my journey hasn't been as strenuous. Has it been painful in previous years? Yes, I would say this particular season that I've just coming off of is probably the most financially laborious it's been for me in my career. But even through it all, I've just been with so many cool people, my family, my friends. They've all helped however much they can to kind of be here's my small contribution to your dream, because I feel so impassioned by what you're doing that I want to contribute in any way. And I think that's where if I could provide advice to people, it's really tap into your network. I don't think a lot of people realize how many people can actually help them. And it may not be necessarily funding in terms of dollars in your pocket at that moment, but they can connect to you, or they can open a door for you, or lead you down a pathway that will lend you to the support that you need.
That's a great tip. Cynthia, you mentioned the trials and tribulations that you have gone through. What are you comfortable sharing about what this journey has looked like for you?
I feel like I can share anything. I think my story is just unfortunately common, but also unique in some aspects. 2018, that Olympic season was quite a turning point for me. I was on the cusp of making the Olympic team, and 2 weeks out was pulled aside by a coach and said, hey, you're going to go to the Olympics, but you're going to go as an alternate. Thumbs up. And I was just well, you and I both know that is the worst position you could be in. I would have rather not been on the team to begin with, or, be told you're going home. Because the structure at that time was that the alternate break woman does all the training runs. You have to, be the champion and support the racing athletes. And mentally, emotionally, I was not in a position to be able to do that, but I had to put on a brave face of, I'm here to support my team.
Sure.
Even though I don't agree, and many people on the team didn't agree with the decision to not name me to the Olympic team. It's funny, even athletes from other nations were questioning it. They're like, why is it Cynthia racing?
Huh.
And I was like, well, if other nations are noticing it, that's a problem.
Right.
I went through those Olympics and I was just like, what more can I do? I basically paused my life and progression in life with getting a job and settling down to put every single ounce of strength, every dollar, blood, sweat, and tears, all the cliches into this. For 5 years, nothing I did wasn't somehow tied to bobsleigh. Jobs that I would take, whether I would go hang out with friends, I had to curtail my diet so that I could be in the sport, because I so truly believed in the ability of going to the team or go to the Olympics, and that's what I had been told. So to kind of have it not come to fruition, I just was like so downtrodden, right? Like you're exhausted. It's devastating. And so I was just like, there's nothing I can do more than what I just put into the sport. I might as well pack it up and go home. So after the games, I was ready to, start looking for real jobs because in my mind, I had reached the pinnacle of what I could do physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and I couldn't go above that.
How did you move on from that or move forward rather? You're still competing in the sport. That's truly devastating to have, after so many years, put your heart, soul, blood into this, to be named an alternate. How did you continue marching on?
It was not an easy decision, I can promise you that. So the conversations actually started at the Olympics. I had a conversation with the push coach, who was also our S&C coach, some of my teammates, and then some of the driving coaches actually pulled me aside and said, hey, just focus on these next 2 weeks, get through it. But keep in mind that in a few weeks' time after the Olympics, there is the driving school in Lake Placid, and I think you could benefit from that. At that time, I didn't want to hear it. I was like, I don't want to see the sport. I don't want to even think about bobsleigh. I'll never watch Cool Runnings ever again. That's how much it was like, I hate the sport so much.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, but I took their advice and I signed up for the driving school and I had no expectations. And that's what everyone told me. They're like, go in there with no expectations, really just go in there to enjoy the process and enjoy the 3 weeks that you're down there. And when I got there, I was super moody still. I hadn't gone a single night without crying after I left the games. So I was just like, I don't think I'm ready for this. But when I got there and I met some of the other athletes that were there too. So there was brakemen who were thinking about transitioning into the pilot role, similar as me. People who had qualified for the Olympic Games, but then their federation told them, no, we're not sending you. So it was just like a lot of people who had a purpose to like prove to themselves that they deserve to be in the sport, and also prove to the others that said no to them that they are just as capable, if not more, to do it. It was just such a great environment. Everyone's supportive of each other. There were coaches from other nations who were helping you out too. And I learned to love the sport again in those 3 weeks. And I found my competitive driving again because I thought it had gone. I honestly thought it had gone away and I'd never want to be in competitive sport ever.
So catch us up to today. How did you get from that driving camp to fourth in the world recently this past year? Because I think a lot of athletes would have walked away.
Yeah, it's the journey has been interesting. When you switch from brakeman to pilot, or even when you're just starting in bobsleigh as a pilot right out of the gate, you have to come to accept that you're going to crash, and you're going to crash a lot.
That's so scary.
It is, honestly. Like, it's one of those things where you're just like, this could be a run that I crash. This could be a run where I make it down smoothly. This could be a run where I hit every wall, and you kind of have to have that in the back of your mind and be okay with it. The hardest thing for me was knowing that someone was going to be at the back of the sled with me and I was responsible for them. And that's, I think, the hardest piece that you have to get over, is that person is trusting you to make sure that you get the both of you guys down safely. And again, they come into it knowing that with a new driver, you're probably going to crash and you're probably going to get hurt. But if you believe in the process and you believe in each other, you're able to carry through to it. So the first quad, I would say the first 2 seasons were rough. Like, it was one of those like demoralizing things of like, I don't think I'm good for this. I don't think I can make it. I stupidly switched back to being a brakeman again. That was never in the cards. But, again, I had such great coaches who really believed in me. They're like, no, you can do this. Other people have done this. They've been in the same situation as you. You're actually not that far off from where you need to be. I've seen worse drivers when they first started out win Olympic medals in 4 years. So like, it's definitely within the realm of possibility. And holding true to that fact was what kind of motivated me to get to the first Olympics in 2022. I had a breakout season the year before, and then into the Olympic season was just like on the podium every single time. Finished in 8th at the Olympics, which was a little heartbreaking because I was just like, I was so close. But now, I have all these lessons. I've been driving for 7 years now. I'm going into my 8th year of driving. There's so many lessons that I've learned that have brought me to where I was this season, where this past season was by far the worst season I've ever performed at. Like, barely getting on the podium, struggling to make top 10. And, it brought me back to like my first year of driving, second guessing myself, questioning whether I was capable of doing this again. And then again, one of the teammates that I talked to in 2018 who convinced me to stick around and become a driver, he had since retired, and he came back this past season as one of our massage therapists and as a push coach. And he came back and he provided me with such great insight. And I think that was when my season turned around again. And by the end of the season, I was back on the podium, finished in 2nd place on the last race of the season, and carried that momentum into World Championships where I finished in 4th. And as bittersweet as it is to not get on that podium, it's the best performance I've had had to date at World Championships or at a senior major games. And so I have to take that into consideration of like, look at everything I've done and look where I've come from. And I'm now fourth going into the Olympic Games, sitting in fourth in the world at World Championships.
Absolutely massive. As you are going into this Olympic year with Milan Cortina coming up, how are you preparing and how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I've, it's unfortunate because our seasons keep on getting longer and longer. And then the start of the season just keeps bumping up. So it's like we don't get as much time to recover. But I've been really trying to prioritize recovery because that's the biggest thing. I've read so many studies about the importance of sleep and how that is the best superpower you can have.
Yep.
So I'm working hard on turning my phone off. I'm really bad at like TikTok. I need to turn that. I need to like delete it off my phone. But like I've been really working on, getting to bed early, getting my 8 to 9 hours and using the recovery as the biggest tool because I think that's the last thing. That's the last step I'm missing. I've been working with mental performance coaches and meditation has been a huge component in my recovery and in my process now. From now until the end of the Olympics, just trusting the process and doing what's gotten you to where you're at. In 2022, like I said, I had a breakout season. I was on the podium almost every weekend. And then I got to the Olympic Games and I started to second guess myself and I started to not trust the process and I was chasing things. And I think what I'm going to do different this year is like, I know what I have to do. I know what I need. I have what I need. I don't need to start looking for anything different. I already have all the tools in my tool belt. It's just trusting it and continuing following the process.
Cynthia, one of the things that we are really passionate about at Flame Bearers is elevating a range of athletes and their experiences. What do you wish that people knew about bobsleigh that you think they get wrong?
I always love going back to this scene in Cool Runnings where they're sitting in the bathtub and they're like shifting from side to side as they go through the corners. And as great as that movie is and as great as that scene is, like that's something that we don't do.
Okay.
You have to stay very still because if you move, you can fishtail. And that obviously bleeds time and your speed. But I think the other thing most people don't realize is how behind the scenes unglamorous our sport can really look. Like on TV, I think it's the coolest thing ever.
It looks so cool.
It looks so cool. But behind the scenes, we're our own like pit crew. So like F1, a lot of people like to say bobsleigh's like F1 on ice. And I wish. It's just the driving component that's as close to it as possible. But like, we're our own mechanics at times. We're lugging these heavy sleds to and from the track to the hotel. It's, trying to find a hotel that accommodates our huge sleds. When we're in Europe, we're our own like courier service for our sleds. So we're in sled trucks, these Sprinter vans, and we're driving thousands of kilometers per season to get to and from different stops. You're sleeping on uncomfortable beds. You're eating with food that you're not necessarily familiar with. And it sounds like I'm complaining. I really am just trying to highlight, some of the things
this is the reality. Yeah.
It's the reality of the sport, right? Like I wish we could have a pit crew like in F1 where, I'm just the athlete. I just show up to my sled and everything's ready to go. But there's a lot of long hours that we do off of the track. I would say, between the gym time, between maintaining our sleds, all the reviewing that we do, we're spending like anywhere from 8 to 10 hours each day just to get 2 minutes of ice time.
8 to 10 hours?
Yes. Like it's a full-time job. I think a lot of people don't realize how much time and commitment we put into the sport. You've got to get your workouts in. So you go to the gym, that's at least 2 hours. Then you're sprinting on top of that. And then, like I said, the maintenance of the sled can take quite some time. I think the worst part is polishing our runners. So we have to take sandpaper and we polish the blades that we put underneath our sleds for race day. And that takes anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. So that adds on to the work day. So when I say it's unglamorous, it's quite unglamorous.
Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't know it took that long. That's really helpful to call out. One thing we like to ask every athlete we work with is, what do you wish younger Cynthia knew? So if you could flash back and tell your younger self something, what would you want her to know?
I mean, there's so many things I wish I could go back to my younger self and tell, but I think one of the things—
List them all, whatever works.
I think I wish I knew how to use my voice sooner and be more comfortable in my skin. I think I will always credit bobsleigh with me finding who I am as a person and finding my voice. I was quite a shy person growing up, and to some extent, I'm quite introverted. It's funny when people come up to me and they're like, oh my God, you're so confident and you really do this confidence. I'm like, that's a facade sometimes, like really.
Yeah.
And I always like to tell people this book that I read a few years back called Quiet.
I love Quiet.
It's such a good book, right?
Love it.
It's so good. And I just love it because it really showcased who I was. And I think that's when I started to learn more about myself and tune into my strengths, but also work on my weaknesses. I think I'm a extroverted introvert as like one of the different, Yeah. So I was just like, hey, this is me. And I had to really work on that side of me. I think if I could go back in time, or if I could tell my younger self, I'd probably read that book a lot sooner than I did. I think I read it in my second season of bobsleigh. So I was like around 26, 27, and finding my voice and sticking up for myself. I think that was the other thing, is like I kind of let things go by the wayside and let people talk over me instead of putting my foot down to be like, no, this is what I want. This is who I am. And this is what I'm going to fight for. I love bobsleigh and I love women's bobsleigh. I think the monobob, which is the event that I tend to do better in, is probably the most exciting race on the race weekend. Some people may disagree with me, but I know quite a number of people in our sport who will agree with me that the ambiguity of who can win each race weekend is what makes it so exciting. Mm-hmm. And I love that it's a women's event that's really pushing the envelope in bobsleigh now.
Totally. Actually, I want to follow up on that. How specifically is it pushing women's sports forward?
Women's monobob, it's funny, the story of how women's monobob became a thing was probably the most frustrating thing you'll ever hear. And I don't know if I have enough time to really break down what happened. But one of the main sticking points is that it's the only standardized sled event we have in bobsleigh right now. And there was a lot of pushback against that. Some people definitely did see like the economic and financial benefits of having a standardized sled. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing the benefits of it because it actually does level the playing field. It's not a technology race that we're seeing in some of the other events. It really is who's the best pusher, who's the best driver on any given day, who can maneuver down the track with standardized equipment. And now we're hearing talk that it might be moved into the other disciplines in bobsleigh because they're seeing the benefits of it.
Thanks for tuning in to Flame Bearers Unedited. 2 items. Number 1, if you like what you're hearing and want to be a part of this community, reach out to us at flamebearers.com. We have a contact form. We're actively looking for sponsors and partners to help us increase the reach and the incredible work that we're doing. Number 2, we want to hear from you. What's working? What's not working? Where can we do better? We've launched a Flame Bearers listening survey. It's in the show notes, and we want to hear from you for a chance to win behind the scenes access as well as some really cool Flame Bearer swag. Thanks, and we'll catch you on our next episode.